Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is crying over a dead dog, and somewhere else, someone is eating one. Both of them love animals. Both of them would tell you they do, and neither of them thinks they're doing anything wrong. That's not a contradiction. That's culture. And once you see how it works, you can't unsee it. There is no biological difference between a pet and a food animal, not one that holds up. Pigs are measurably more intelligent than dogs. They solve puzzles. They recognize themselves in mirrors. They form emotional bonds with humans. They grieve. By every cognitive benchmark we use to justify protecting one animal, the pig clears the bar, sometimes higher. And yet, one of them sleeps at the foot of your bed, and the other one is in your sandwich. Something decided that, and it wasn't science. The line between pet and food isn't drawn by the animal. It's drawn by the people looking at it. Anthropologists call this the omnivore's paradox. Humans can eat almost anything, which means at some point, every culture had to decide what it would and wouldn't eat. And those decisions, made thousands of years ago for reasons that had nothing to do with nutrition or animal intelligence, calcified into disgust, into identity, into the quiet moral certainty that what you grew up eating is normal and what someone else grew up eating is wrong. In the United States, eating a dog is unthinkable. The same people who eat pigs, animals with equivalent or greater cognitive complexity, will recoil at the suggestion with genuine horror. That horror isn't a reasoned position. It's an inherited one. It was installed before they were old enough to question it. The disgust came first. The justification came later. In South Korea, dog meat has been eaten for centuries. Consumption has been declining for decades, particularly among younger generations, and it's now controversial even within the country. But the controversy itself is instructive. It isn't driven primarily by the argument that dogs are intelligent. It's driven by a cultural shift. Dogs moved categories. They became pets. And once an animal moves into the pet category, the disgust installs itself in the opposite direction. The category is doing all the work, not the animal. In India, cows are sacred. Killing one is not just culturally taboo. In many states, it is illegal. The same animal that fills hamburgers across the Western world is protected by law, garlanded with flowers, allowed to wander through city traffic unmolested. To most Indians, the idea of eating beef produces the same visceral recoil that eating a dog produces in an American. Different animal, identical mechanism. The disgust is real. Category that generated it is arbitrary. This is what Paul Rozan's research on disgust keeps finding. Disgust isn't a rational response to actual danger. It's a category enforcement mechanism. Once something is labeled food, processing and eating it feels normal. Once something is labeled not food, the same object becomes contaminating, psychologically contaminating. In one of Rosin's experiments, people refused to eat fudge that had been shaped to look like dog feces. They knew it was fudge. They'd watched it being made. They still couldn't do it. The category overrode the information. The same thing happens with animals in reverse. Once an animal enters the pet category, eating it becomes unthinkable regardless of what you know about its cognitive capacity. You can tell someone a chicken is more neurologically complex than a goldfish. They'll nod. They'll still eat the chicken and mourn the goldfish. Because the chicken never made it into the protected category, the goldfish did. That's the whole story. But here's where it gets more complicated, because the categories aren't stable. They move. And when they move, the moral certainty moves with them. Lobsters used to be fed to prisoners in colonial America. They were so abundant, so associated with poverty, that feeding them to inmates was considered cruel and unusual. Servant contracts sometimes specified that workers couldn't be made to eat lobster more than 3 times a week. Now, a single lobster tail costs $40 at a mid-range restaurant. The animal didn't change. The category shifted, and the entire moral and aesthetic apparatus around it shifted in exactly the same direction. Horse meat is eaten regularly in France, Italy, Japan, and Kazakhstan. In the United Kingdom and the United States, it is essentially taboo, tied to the horse's historical role as a working companion and military animal. Horses moved toward the pet category in Anglophone cultures in a way they didn't everywhere else. The meat didn't change. The relationship changed. And the relationship determined the category. And the category determined whether the thought of eating it produces pleasure or nausea. The same mechanism runs in both directions. In the 20th century, the United States conducted one of the most successful category-shifting operations in food history entirely by accident. As factory farming scaled up, the animals disappeared from view. They stopped being visible creatures with behaviors and became products. The abstraction did the work. Once you never see the animal, once the only form it takes in your life is a shrink-wrapped package, maintaining the not-food category becomes very difficult. The category requires proximity. It requires the animal to have a face, which is exactly why the animals most protected by pet status are the ones humans look at most. Dogs and cats are in the home. Their faces are familiar. Their emotional states are legible. They respond to your name. They look back at you. That looking back is enormously powerful. It's almost impossible to maintain the food category for something that looks back at you with recognition. Pigs don't get that chance. Neither do cows, neither do chickens. They are kept out of sight specifically because proximity would complicate the category. If every person who ate a chicken had spent a week living with one, the category would be under pressure. The food industry understands this. The physical separation of farm from table isn't just logistical, it's psychological. It's category maintenance. And this is where the question stops being just about food and starts being about something harder. If the line between pet and food is cultural, if it's arbitrary, if it's maintained by proximity and disgust and inherited categories that predate our ability to reason about them, then the moral certainty most people feel about what's acceptable to eat isn't a conclusion. It's a starting point that was handed to them. And somewhere on the other side of the wall, there is someone with an equally certain, equally inherited, equally sincere set of categories pointing in a completely different direction. That doesn't mean all categories are equal. It doesn't mean nothing matters. What it means is that the disgust you feel is not the argument. It's the thing that replaced the argument. And if you've never asked where it came from, you've never actually examined the position. You've just inherited it. There's a cow in a field somewhere that is, by every measure we have, as cognitively complex as the dog asleep on your couch. It has a name. On some farms, it forms attachments. It has been shown to experience something researchers carefully describe as emotional states. It will be processed on Tuesday, and the only thing standing between those two animals isn't intelligence. It isn't suffering capacity. It isn't biology. It's which side of a cultural line they were born on. A line drawn so long ago that it feels like nature. A line so invisible that most people will live their entire lives never once noticing it's there.